everybody. Alex Wellings here from Coffee for Closers. Today we're talking all about F&G's new study they just put out. I got Tom Ross here on the show with us today. We're talking all about an interesting pre-retiree study, all about their thoughts on the current climate of the financial world. All that and more in today's show. All right, everybody, welcome to Coffee for Closers. Alex Wellings here. We have a very special guest. I got Mr. Rick Kallmeyer, of course, on the air with us, Mr. Co-host here, but also Mr. Tom Ross from F&G, talking all about some of the more recent studies that they've published. We'll talk about product another time, but today we really wanted to spend some time on a very interesting survey that F&G put out recently. We're going to unpack that a little bit today. We're going to talk a little bit about kind of the status of, say, the world of retirees, pre-retirees, and what they're kind of contemplating and potentially what you as advisors could be focusing on more as you start to have these conversations. Maybe good tidbits. The survey found a lot of good tidbits for you to keep in the back of your mind as you're starting to talk with folks either at your seminars or in appointments. Tom, welcome to the show, man. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you.
Thank you
for having
an
me.
incredible partner of ours, and you know, obviously, we love your products and everything like that. But this was a very interesting survey, and so we were excited that you came and you brought this along. And as we read through it, we've gotten more and more impressed with the findings. And so we're going to talk a little bit about some of that stuff. But yeah, man, welcome to the Coffee for Closers set.
Well, thank you for having me, guys. I feel this is a powerful room right here.
Yeah,
so,
it's
there's a lot going on.
You like
here.
the set?
I love the set. I love what you guys are doing. This is awesome. So you guys are doing great with the show, and I'm just happy that you're giving me the opportunity to be here. So,
well,
thank you.
You know, the F&G's become quickly a big carrier for us, and a big push for us. You guys have been doing a lot of great things, and you know, again, great to have you as a sponsor. So let's get into this survey a little bit. So there was, so why did F&G put this survey out, or why did they start doing this survey? They just do they generally do these types of surveys?
So absolutely. So we are looking to continually add value to our advisors and our IMO partners. And so this is actually our second annual risk tolerance tracker survey that we've done. So we are just looking to continually put out resources for our IMO partners, for our advisors, to really help educate the hardworking American men and women about what our financial solutions and what our solutions can offer them.
Yeah, it really got into the basic findings of like, hey, you know, we talked to all these pre-retirees and got what their main concerns are. So, you know, there might even be some positive affirmations for what advisors already know. But some of these stats are really interesting. So let's talk about some of the key findings here. So first, key findings, top concerns and worries. Majority, 80% of Americans over 50 are worried about inflation in retirement. We know that. I mean, that's that means, I think every probably advisor watching this has heard us talk about inflation. So maybe that's not a super exciting thing. 71% said they were worried about a recession. It's, you know, obviously another big talking point. We just went through this whole political midterm, and that was a big head, you know. And then more than half, 66% are worried about rising healthcare costs. And you were just saying, it's like, well, I don't know if that's an interesting stat or not, but I do think it is. I mean, Rick, we've talked in the federal space quite a bit about the FEHB, the Federal Employee Health Benefit, being probably one of the number one questions we get asked.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's like that they pin almost every other financial decision. This is just in the federal space, mind you. They pin almost every other financial decision, their pension, their TSP withdrawal strategy, their life insurance needs, off of that FEHB decision and what they're going to do with Medicare. And so I don't think it is. I mean, I think if anything, it might even be a little understated. But I'm wondering what the other 33%, like I was saying, are not worried. Why aren't they worried about it? They must just be really wealthy. That's all I can imagine.
Or super healthy.
Or super healthy. Yeah. It comes for us all, though, man. And then, you know, at a certain point, if you just live really long, it's just going to be really expensive when you need it, you know?
Yeah.
But
I feel like with healthcare costs, it's kind of an odd, I guess, like thought process with finances and retirement, right? It's like a lot of people, at least in the conversations I've had, they don't, I guess, financially plan for health emergencies and costs, right? Like it's like, okay, I have this retirement account that's doing well, and if something pops up, then I'll just use that, right? But they don't plan for like, okay, like I should have at least my deductible covered, right? Like those kind of things. Like
Yeah.
healthcare seems to be like, it's not like, again, we talk to retirees all the time. I'm gonna need a new car every 5 years, right? I need a new roof every 15. Like there's expenses you can plan for and things you can think about and like have a thought process for, but because maybe health situations aren't plannable, people just kind of like don't think about it, and then it just happens, right? So
But you got
that
to
could be some
start
of the
having
30%.
that, like, you got to start spending their money. Like a good sales
Mhm.
guy, and plenty of folks that watch this show
Yeah.
are already doing this sort of thing. You got to start spending that money. What do you do when you're like, I bet you every one of the folks on this will go and say something like, hey, you know, in retirement, what are you looking to do? What do you want to do? You want to travel? You want to play some more golf? What are you going to do? And they'll be, you know, they're happy to have those conversations, but
Yep.
they don't do something as simple as like, all right, you've got this health plan. Let's say it has a $5,000 deductible every year.
Yep.
How often do you think that you'd go a year? Like, how many years would you go before you'd need to pay off that entire deductible?
Yep.
Right?
And that's actually a really good point. So, going back to that number, 66% are worried about rising healthcare costs in retirement.
Sure.
Nearly half of the pre-retirees, though,
Yeah.
have not planned for unexpected healthcare costs.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. Nearly half, 47% of pre-retirees have not planned for unexpected healthcare costs. So again, it's a safe bet. Why do we say this? Why are we doing this going through this surveys? Because this is a safe bet for an advisor sitting down with a retiree. You almost have a 50-50 chance that maybe that's what the 33% of people are doing. They just have no clue about it. They're like, wait, what about healthcare? No. But again, you have a very safe bet, 50-50 chance talking to this person that they haven't done any planning. And if they have, you kind of inspect what you expect. You hope that they've done all that planning. If they haven't, then yeah, okay, let's walk them through. Let me help you spend this money on healthcare for a few years. How do you know how many folks end up in a nursing home or in some sort of aided living facility?
Mm-hmm.
How many folks, right? What are the percentages there? As an advisor, have those percentages in your back pocket. Understand the costs of long-term care, right, or home health care. Understand that on average, that's like 3 years of care or something like that, I want to say. David Connor was saying.
Mm-hmm.
3 to 5 years.
3.2.
3.2.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of money being shelled out.
Yep.
So, all right, you've got $2 million sitting in all of your retirement assets. Now, let's spend a good quarter of that probably on healthcare. Let me show you how quickly we can get to that $500,000, right? Folks don't do it. I bet you a lot of these advisors haven't had a healthcare discussion with their clients in a long time. That's a shocker.
Yep.
But that's why, you mentioned it. I was like, well, I don't know, man. In the Fed space, at least, it is almost one of the things that we really have encouraged. And when we first started getting into the appointments, we had dinner last night, and we were talking about some of the appointments that we sit on. When we first started getting into the appointments, Rick and I would say, only things we really need to know, FERS, life insurance. FERS is their pension. Life insurance and TSP. TSP being their 401k. And then when we get in there, we're like, maybe I'd also, just talk a little bit about health benefits.
Know it a little bit.
Know it a little bit.
Yeah.
Then like months later, it was like, you really got to kind of know health benefit.
Yeah.
And it's like, now it's like, all right, first things first, we're going to go through health benefit, and then we're going to start into the pension.
How it works.
yeah. I mean, it's such a kingpin because, again, I think it becomes top of mind for folks, especially as they're, starting to get to those retiree world. Another thing is, if they don't qualify for life insurance, here's another great point on health insurance. They don't qualify for life insurance, or they're thinking like they're going to get table rated. As an advisor, you start going down that path trying to sell life insurance. You start to discover health issues. Then where's your pivot? Straight to health issues.
Yeah.
And why now that you have health issues and you're about to go into retirement, the proper planning for safeguarding your assets to potentially pay for these sort of things is going to be paramount for you. So now you found yourself right into an annuity sale just like that.
Well, and that's a really good point too. People are living longer, and longevity risk is a real thing. So, I will give you credit, Alex. So that point is so important about, healthcare costs and, when you think about it, because again, like I said, people are just living longer.
Yeah. How are we going to plan for 20 years of a chronic illness, right? 4 is, you catch something, 5 years, maybe you pass away. But I think there's a lot more people that are retiring at 60, living till 85, 86 with chronic illnesses that have plagued them for 20 plus years, right? How are you going to fund that? How are you going to fund care? And even if you don't get confined to a facility, and you still need somebody to help do remedial chores and things like that, maybe it doesn't qualify for a well-being rider or something to that degree, right? Like you still have to plan for the deductible, the extra health that's on top of it if your health plan doesn't cover all of it, right? Like there's a lot more medical situations to cover when you do find somebody that, again, is going to get table rated, or that you look at and say, well, we can't do life insurance. That's a bummer. And a lot of people, I think you're right, like give up, right? We went for the annuity. We went for the financial play. They didn't really like it. So we switched to life insurance, talk about that. They're going to get rated. Not going to be able to afford it. But there's nothing I can really do here versus going back in and saying, look, like if you can't afford life insurance, you can't get life insurance. We've got 20 years we have to plan in medical expenses that we should be expecting,
Why can't
right?
you? Is it just simply because you're 55, 65 years old and you can't afford that, the age-based? Or are you getting rated and that health issue is potentially
going to persist?
Then that's the insurance company telling you that you've got a health issue that potentially could get expensive and would cost them living benefits expense potentially and the death benefit to come earlier than expected.
Yep.
Right? They don't want that. Right? So anyway, it's been a good tool for Rick and I as we've worked in the federal space to be like, okay, we're going to start talking about life insurance because the life insurance drives the annuity conversation, in my opinion. If we're I almost go in for the life insurance conversation first because what's the real purpose for life insurance? Protect against somebody dying too young without enough assets, right? Primarily. Sure, there's cash value situations, whatever. But so if somebody comes to me and says, no, I'm not interested in life insurance. Honestly, I'm all good. It's like, well, then you're telling me that potentially you've got enough assets to take care of yourself. Between maybe an outside policy you already have. If you have an outside policy, let's take a look at it, see if it's still the best thing for you. Or potentially you don't need life insurance at all and you've got enough assets stored away and you're not worried about passing away and not having something for your spouse or loved one. Okay, if that's the case, then what are you doing that the insurance company was doing, which was guaranteeing that that money was going to be there for you? And so now you're saying that you don't have a guarantee for this money because you're just solely in bonds and stocks. Okay, well, then potentially we need to talk about other options that would allow you to really become your own insurance company to a degree, right? Like you're insuring yourself. And let's get as safe as we can while not giving up as much growth as you can. It's a perfect fit for a fixed indexed annuity at that point, right? And the other thing about this study that was so huge was the Americans now are more than ever wanting to go back to work. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, absolutely. I mean, so we look at this this study and we see, changing budgets. Yeah. 62% of retirees are changing their budget due to inflation. And I actually should have plugged that before that. We go back to that first stat, 80% of the people that we surveyed over 50 are worried about inflation.
Right.
So they're changing their budgets because of inflation. Part-time work is a real thing now. So
55% were saying they want to go back to work.
55%
or not once.
Was it want or are having to?
Having to.
Okay.
They're assuming they're going to have to do part-time work. It's not going to be an option.
Yeah. Exactly. And then 1/3, so 31% of pre-retirees say it's unrealistic for them to retire without a part-time job.
Takeaways for me on something like that is, okay, if I'm giving a presentation, the presentation is going to be about how to prevent, David Conner popularized this, work-tirement, right? Where it's like you get to work in retirement. It's like David's got the, if you don't know David Conner, he's got this incredible Southern drawl. He's like, we gotta prevent work-tirement. Does anybody know about work-tirement? And he's got this all over his, he's got like 50, a collage of Walmart greeters on his PowerPoint slide. It's a powerful thing. The whole audience is like laughing, but also like, hey, look, just a little bit of proper planning, folks, can put you in a place where you don't potentially have to do that, right? And maybe you're trying to guess it on your own, but maybe you could prevent this sort of scenario from happening unless you want to go back to work, right? You could take the need to go back to work out of it and make it just a want to go back to work situation. So if you end up wanting to, fine. There's certainly folks that do that, but 55% assuming that they need to.
I
And,
think
and I assume 62% of retirees changing their budget is them just reducing their standard of living to some degree, right?
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're giving yourself a pay cut in retirement because of inflation.
Right.
Inflation can absolutely erode your lifestyle
Sure.
in retirement, especially if planned properly.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, you're taking money out, securing losses constantly, you know.
Well, I think too, like what was the beginning of the study? I think it said, what 80% were afraid of inflation, 70% were afraid of a recession, and I know later in the study it kind of talked about how, well, we have two answers, right? It's either you go back to work and get a part-time job, try to make money that way, but also you start, and it appears in the data that you start chasing heavier returns, more risky assets. And I think that's something, Alex, you and I have both seen. And I know you've kind of made fun of me over from talking to clients and having to back up my stances as a 30-year-old and 20-year-old versus retirees, right? But I think later in the study discusses people moving more towards aggressive assets, right? Putting more of their retirement monies into stocks to try to beat inflation to keep up with returns, which again doesn't really agree with the whole recession fears, right? But it's like, what are you going to do? I'm already going back to work.
God, that's a
I
good
need
point.
4%, right? So now
yeah,
I got to get
gotta
8%.
combat inflation, so I'm going to get more aggressive, and then I'm going to. But I also, what was the stat on recession, folks?
70%.
70%. 71% said they're worried about a recession. 80% are worried about inflation, so they're getting more aggressive, like you're saying.
Even though they're afraid of a recession happening, it's like, what are you going to do, right? I already picked up a part-time job now that I'm retired. I've already allocated my money back to more aggressive stuff because I need more money, right? And again, I think it was something like almost 20% into things like crypto and your riskier assets, and I think 40 to 50% in stocks. But it's like, so it becomes this like, what can you do, right? And again, for the past 10 years, we haven't been able to really even look at bonds. And even now, it's still tricky, right? It's like you can find some short duration stuff that maybe gets you a better return, but obviously we know interest rates are going to continue rising, so bond prices fall, right? So it's kind of this like, what do I do situation. And I think that's where you guys really come into play because, again, obviously with the product portfolio you have, being able to get some growth, more of a return, keep the principal. There's not a lot of products out there like that besides what we do. So I just thought it was a really interesting take to say like a large majority, 70% of people are afraid that the bottom's going to fall out of this thing. And when you say recession, obviously a 2008 comes to mind. This isn't going to be a small thing, and it hasn't been so far, right? 25% down. I think we're at like 16% now. But it's interesting to see 70% of people saying we really think the market's going to go down, and then still having to financially allocate something that disagrees with that thought process.
Absolutely. And to your point, Rick, today we're not talking about the F&G portfolio, but I do want to say, we have solutions for whether it's guaranteed income, protected growth, protecting your retirement nest egg from downside, loss.
Yeah.
We've got that. So my call to action is everybody listening here today, call your Megastar people and ask about our portfolio, because I know we have one of the most competitive in the industry, and we're committed to having a competitive portfolio.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say is anybody that's tuning in today, call your guys.
But, and it's one of those things, too, though, that we haven't had to do a whole ton of promotion towards the products that are offered by F&G. Folks are flocking to them. It's hard to deny the things that you're doing, right? So kudos to y'all for having such an incredible portfolio. And yeah, I'd encourage everybody to come and take a look at what's going on at F&G and just understand all the different options that are out there.
To piggyback off a point you're making, though, Alex, so in this study, though, 60% of Americans over 50 want steady income in retirement.
Yeah, I was just getting it's an incredible stat. And it's so, they want this, but they don't do that, right? Yeah. They want steady income. And we've all seen that as advisors, either doing workshops or working on appointments or whatever. We see folks, we say, hey, what's the number one concern for anybody right here in retirement? Oh, running out of money, right? That's the number one thing. It's probably higher than healthcare costs, but running out of money, okay, well, if somebody said that they could guarantee that you'd have all that money, would you take it? If it meant that you potentially couldn't get an increase in money, would you give up the potential increase to standard of living in retirement, right? In retirement, and guarantee your current standard of living for the rest of your life. And I'd be interested to hear what that audience would say to that, right? Because that sometimes is the cost of doing that sort of thing,
Mm.
right? But I don't know that that should be the goal in retirement. We talk about that on the show all the time. I was like, I don't know that your goal should be to increase your standard of living in retirement. It shouldn't be. I mean, it should have been that while you're working, right?
Yeah.
Get as high as you can possibly get, and then eventually, because I don't know that any good planning can account for rising expenses. Then on top of that, the inflation that is natural to come, even unnatural inflation like maybe we're in right now, and then on top of that, tax risks and all those things. Like at a certain point, planning can't account for all of the variables, right? So potentially you increase your standard of living based on stocks doing well 1 year, right? So stocks go up 20%, or we have like the best 10-year run ever, and then things fall off sharply. What a travesty, because you are probably increasing your but we know how the market works, right? On average, over a certain period of time, it should go somewhere around 8 to 10%, 8 to 12%. That should be something we should all be excited about too. That's a good return. But you've been living as if it's just going to go up at 24% over and over, and now you got a loss year of what? Let's say the market goes down by 20% 1 year, like we're kind of in right now. Are you going to be able to quickly pivot and drop all of these expenses? No, most folks have most of their expenses are debts, and they're concurrent, right? So if you increase your standard of living, yeah, I put that new pool in my new retirement house, right? Now I got a home equity loan on top of everything else, and you can't diminish your expenses for the same time that the market's down. So now what are you doing? You're pulling money out of this account in a down market, and again, all because you wanted to increase your standard of living in retirement. And I don't think that should be the goal. And I think more retirement planners should be talking about is, so if is it your goal to live beyond or into the next echelon of standard of living in retirement? If so, that's a totally different planning style. If it is that you're happy where you are right now, then good planning potentially could guarantee that. And one of the best tools out there would be an annuity for it. The stats say that people aren't either being told to do that or, or not told the right way to how to understand that. Because what did it say? It said something like, gosh, here it is. For example, survey found that those 50 to 59 are more likely to own stocks, 42%, even crypto, 18%, versus products that could be structured into a guaranteed steady income like annuities. And like you said, 67% of Americans, though, want steady income in retirement. We found that they invest more in volatile asset classes like the ones I just mentioned. Very, very interesting.
Well, to piggyback even further on that, only 19% of those that we surveyed own an annuity.
Yeah.
So what an opportunity. I mean, the numbers are truly on our side. So there's never better a time to be in this industry and to be, talking about what an annuity can do for, somebody's portfolio.
I'd be very interested to see how many of those folks have bank products.
Yeah, CDs, such.
Yeah.
Treasuries.
That'd be very
I have a
interesting.
agreeing counterpoint as well. I think you have that side of the aisle very well, and I think that's almost like your more negative case, right? Like somebody who has saved up a good portion of money and maybe thinks they're going to be okay, should be okay if we budget properly and plan right? I do see a lot of the other side of the case too, where especially in the federal, where like the people are just hoarders, right? They work for 30 years, they consistently do 10 to 20% of their income goes into their retirement account, and they just frankly have no idea about how distribution works. And we see it out in the private sector too, where you have these people that have $600, $700, $1.2, $1.4 million, and they're so afraid to spend it because they don't know how or what to do with it, how to spend it properly to make sure it lasts their life, right? So you see a lot of people like in a situation where, like last year, right, you get a 28% return on the S&P, and you look at it and you're like, well, I don't want to pull money out because that pulls my gains off the table, and I might be able to make more next year, right? And then this year rolls around and you lose 20 to 15%. It's like, well, obviously I don't want to pull out when the market's down, and then it comes back up 8%. You're like, well, we're just getting back up, so I don't really want to. So you have these people that live for 10 years without touching the money, living on pennies and dollars, just, still not spending their retirement. It's like, look, you're 71, 72 years old. You barely lived your retirement. You have now $1.8 million. Like, you're just going to leave that to the kids. And I think you have both sides of the coin where people, again, the purpose of a retirement planner and a distribution planner to say, look, like, you can afford to spend some of this money, right? Like, you have all this money you've saved up for years. You've lived on a very, low income, low desire, not treated yourself. And again, spend some of it, enjoy it. Like, you're just going to leave all this money, all this account to your children or to a charity. It's like, why are you still driving the 2003 Toyota when you could at least be driving a newer car that you don't have to worry about breaking down and those kind of things? So I think you have both sides of the coin that really validate having a distribution planner and retirement planner, right?
You gotta be willing, as today's retirement planning, to help people spend their money.
Absolutely.
You gotta be like a spending coach too.
Yeah, take it with you.
Yeah. Or maybe they want to leave some of that money, and that's money we're not talking about, right? Like, that's money that can be in a different position somewhere else. But if it's money that was meant to be spent, and then you're not spending it because of what market conditions are existing right now, then, how silly.
I think you have two sides of the coin, right? You have, like, obviously this is a much larger pool, but, like, this is still a good chunk of people too, where they have done a proper job of saving and still either maybe have a Fidelity guy, whatever it may be, and are just so afraid to spend the money that they still live in a situation where they could increase their lifestyle. They could be living a more comfortable lifestyle. But again, because of market fears, because of inflation fears, because of these same statistics, just sit back and hold all of it. And it's like, that's not the way to live either, right? So
I don't know. I think, a lot of folks too right now are doing a lot of considering about either changing budgets, working in retirement a little bit more, or, and that's a fine thought. Oh, I'm going to work in retirement while you're in the early 10 years of your retirement. But let's say you do make it longer on. Study talks about that a little bit more. You are still more likely to live longer the older you get, right? So as you get older, let's say you work a few more years, part-time or anything like that, you're just stealing the good years. Hegna's big thing. Go, slow go, no go, right? You don't ever get the opportunity to steal some of the no-go years, right? Those are going to happen. And so if we split it into thirds and you get a third, 10, 10, 10, and a 30-year retirement, you're going to, okay, bad year this year for retirees. I'm going to work 2 more years to recover the 20-something% that I lost, right? But it could be longer than that. Look at the lost decade. It could be longer than that. If that's really the number you're trying to get back to, it could be much longer. But let's assume it's just a couple more years. So you just stole 2 go-go years, 2 travel years, 2 enjoy it with the missus years, whatever.
Grandkids,
right? And so, and you swapped it for, now the proportion's all skewed, right?
And to your credit, Rick, I mean, you hit it right on the head. I mean, that's the importance of having a great retirement planner, a great retirement coach, and finding those goals in retirement, because you should enjoy those years. You've worked so hard for all of those years, and for what? Do you want to spend time with the grandkids? Do you want to spend time with the wife? Do you want to travel? Do you want to golf? What do you want to do? And I think that's really what a great retirement coach will do. And
and too many folks are just about preservation of asset. But you can talk about preservation of assets and still spend money. We're not talking about not spending money. We're talking about making sure the money's still here to cover the basic needs, and then allowing them to spend any excess stuff. Like, nobody's telling anybody that the FIA has to be everything for somebody. We're just saying that it's an incredibly useful tool, and if you don't believe us, what's the other safe money strategy out there that you're using? Because if you're telling me bonds, clearly that's not the case anymore, right? We didn't think this world would exist, right? Fed would never put interest rates down at 0. Could never happen, right?
For years.
They were forced to, man. I was on a show, 2 days ago? Was that when Kane was here? So 2 days ago, we were on a show, and Kane's got this incredible slide in his presentation that talks about the boom and bust days, right? The market going up for 10 years, and then the crash for the next few, or negative return years. And then booms and busts, and he's got all these things. And there's this really long run from 2009 to 2019, or 2020, really. because I didn't consider 2020 a bad year. That was an incredible rally at the end of the year. It was a bad few months, but it rallied back,
hard,
right? So there's a little, and if we're gonna peak, it would do every little peaks and valleys. Then that slide was riddled with mistakes. Then, but but it's still a good year. So the end of 2020, let's call it that. And I interjected him and I said, look, that's all well and good, but that 2009 to 2020 was an incredibly manufactured bull run market.
All the way through 2021, right? It's just till January this year we started eating.
They were doing things the Fed was never willing to do before, which was lower interest rates so low because they had to prevent what had happened in 2008. They weren't. They just put duct tape on a pig or whatever, or lipstick on a pig.
Duct tape on a pig.
Yeah, that makes sense. Lipstick on a pig, right?
Well, they tried to, right? They tried to adjust it in 2018. That's why we had a down year in 2018, right? Towards the end of the year.
They're like, we're going to just fiddle with this, see if we can go back up all of a sudden.
Brought the market down like crazy, and then they had to switch all the way back and was like, all right, well, this didn't work out, right? And then you had 2019, 2020, and now we're forced to, right? And then 2020,
we end up having to inject some cash into the world, right? It's like, because how did the Fed usually inject cash? They just lowered interest rates. People went out and borrowed more, threw more money into other things. Now, Fed's got to raise rates, so now you can't do that, right? You can't lower it anymore. So what do we got to do? We got to print money. Print money is just going to exacerbate the issue in the first place.
That's where we are today with inflation.
Now we're inflation, and the Fed has nowhere to go but up. And so now, we're going to raise the rates up, and bonds are going to crash, even while the market's crashing, which wasn't supposed to happen. And so now folks are kind of in this place where the FIA's world, because, obviously the Fed's raising interest rates, FIAs are going to get more competitive, right? So now the FIA world's just having its heyday. We're about to have the best 5 years, maybe 10 years of annuity sales ever, because bonds can no longer say, hey, we're the safe money strategy for the people, right? It's an easy thing. It's liquid. It's great safety. Nope.
Because at least even back in like 2012 to 2015, whatever you want to call it, like that time period, if you did have some market kind of correction, you could go to bonds because at least they weren't moving. Right? They weren't going anywhere. You can't go any lower because the price is already there, and they weren't going to increase interest rates. So at least it was a cash equivalent that get you 2%, right? So now it's,
over the last decade, you're right. Over the last decade, it was kind of like
you're just
bonds
flat,
weren't great, but they are
safe,
and but annuities were starting to make their case. And then it crashed.
Absolutely, and you look at the FIA space too. They're continuing to evolve. And there are so many great features that just haven't been there before. So the now is truly the time. Again, you said it's a heyday, but the FIA space, an annuity. Have those conversations with people.
Oh yeah.
Annuities are not a bad word.
They're looking for them. There's not an American retiree out there that doesn't feel like they need some safety. And so now, if bonds aren't their hero, the hero they thought they were, the hero they need probably is in the insurance world. And so these insurance products are going to be there to fight the good fight. We were talking about, I just had this thought and I just lost it. But, we've been in this conversation that the annuity world, now, maybe I'll save it for another day. But, look, the annuity world is just, again, it's going to have its heyday. I don't want to trade any lines into another conversation for another day. But
great study.
It is a great study. It is something that, I think folks needed to hear. They needed to hear the fact that Americans are on this path and they have these thoughts. And it's information folks can use in their presentations, right? Or in their conversations, whichever. Or I would build a whole presentation around this study. It's an incredible study.
Well, in this study, I mean, it's available for our advisors and your advisors. So, I can make sure to get you guys.
Yeah, we'll put it in the description of the show, and we'll have it out there for anybody that wants to read it. But I might very well put a presentation together using some of these stats, because that is an incredible path to walk somebody through and to poll the audience throughout. Hey, how many of you folks, because you've got the odds on you, on your side. The odds are that everybody in that room, when you ask them, are they worried about, who's here's worried about inflation, right? Darn near every hand should go up, right? See, that's what advisors are looking for, is when I give a good presentation, that I know I'm going to get concurrence from my audience on each of the subjects that I bring up. And then I can bring them along a path to my conclusion, right? But I think sometimes a good presenter doesn't always want to poll the audience because they don't want to get an adverse response or don't know how to handle it. And a presentation like this or a study like this is there to aid you and kind of walk you down that path. Here's a concurrence. It's already there. Your odds are in your favor. Start talking about them wanting income and not wanting to work, right? It's like, well, what solves income? Who out there knows what could potentially solve the income problem, right? Well, I don't want an annuity, right? Maybe you do.
I'm a big believer. People don't buy products; people buy solutions.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the solution could be an annuity.
Yeah.
I think it also gives a really good basis too of like why and how you guys are building the products the way you are, right? Like I feel like a lot of times we sit there and look at a product that a company will put out and be like, why? Who are they making this for? Like why did this company build this? What were the thought process behind it? I don't get who's going to look at this as a solution to what retirement issue they have. But I think you guys build a lot of really good products, and I think it's because you do research like this to say, okay, what are the problems out there?
Yeah.
Let's poll people. Let's ask them, what are you dealing with? What are you fighting through? What's your issue? And then we actually build products to back up that solution to it to say, hey, look, this is the issue. If we tinker with the numbers this way and make it work this way and build this thought process, then we can build a product that will fix your inflation worries, your market risk worries, the income worries, right? So I think you guys have a pretty tactical approach to the way you guys are working in the spaces you're hitting with your product portfolio. So,
yeah, man, an incredible study. Thanks for sharing it with us.
Yeah,
it ended up being great, man. We were going to talk all product, but this is even better because I think that's what this show's all about is just getting good sales ideas, getting good facts about it. And this is the facts about the pre-retiree market, folks. So if you're out there, you want to learn more about this study, we've got it in the description for you. If you have any questions about F&G and F&G's product line, give us a call. It's an incredibly hot time for F&G. They've gobbled up a ton of advisors' attentions out there. I mean, certainly here at Megastar, but I know beyond as well. Kudos to you, Tom. Thanks for coming on the show, man.
Hey, Alex and Rick, thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah.
Pleasure.
Appreciate the partnership.
Yeah, man.
Pleasure.
Yeah, everything's good. All right, everybody. We'll see you next time on Coffee for Closures. Thanks for watching. See ya.